So Nox has been here for roughly a week now, and I've got to say she is a whole lot of fun. I really enjoy her playstyle, but I will say she can be tough to get the hang of, even though she is really useful. And so today I wanted to run you guys through some basic tips and tricks when it comes to playing as Nox. Now I am going to be starting my ultimate hunter guides during this season, and so I will have a much more in-depth video on Nox in the near future, not only including general tips and tricks, but just a whole bunch of stats and stuff broken down for you guys so that you can learn everything there is to know about not only her, but every hunter in the game. So keep your eyes peeled for that as well. And if you are new around here, then consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any upcoming Star Wars Hunters content. Now, getting into some tips and tricks so far that I've found out for Nox. The first tip I have is actually just to do with her regular weapon, that obviously being the bow. And something that I've found really useful is that it is definitely worth always drawing the bow fully for obviously the max damage. I don't think it's really worth just kind of spraying it, because even though you're obviously getting off more shots, it's not dealing as much damage. But that being said, once you've landed a shot with that max damage, usually that's going to be anywhere from about 160 to 180 damage. And obviously, depending on the hunter that you're shooting at, if you do hit a shot with max damage, it is then definitely worth just sort of rapid firing that bow, because usually they'll only have a little bit of health left. It's obviously a bit different if it's against like Groz or someone like that who's got a lot more health. But for pretty much anyone who's not a tank, if you hit them with max damage, then usually you just only need to hit them with one or maybe two of those quick shots by just tapping the trigger instead. So definitely make the most of that. You don't always have to draw that bow fully. Once you've hit that first shot, you can definitely finish off enemies with one of those quick shots. Now, I've also noticed, and I don't know if this is like a glitch or just like a visual bug and it's not actually working the way that it kind of looks like it is on screen, but it seems like you can actually like full on spam shots if you just absolutely spam the hell out of the trigger, and it looks like it kind of shoots faster than the game intends it to. I'm talking like 3 to 5 arrows per second. And again, I don't know if that's just a visual bug and it's not actually dealing all of that damage, but there's been times when it feels like 3 or 4 of those shots are connecting and I'm just draining health from my enemies. So I have no doubt that that will be fixed at some point, but for right now, if you just spam the absolute hell out of the trigger, sometimes it doesn't really work and it will just shoot at the regular pace, but sometimes you can get off like 3 shots in a second, which is definitely a little bit busted. And it's fair to say that that is a very useful way of playing, even though it's a little bit dodgy because that clearly isn't the way that it's meant to work. But hey, you may as well make the most of it while it is working. Now, something else that I have noticed about Nox is that she's definitely not the best up close and personal, and so it's definitely worth saving your aerial dodge ability for when some of the melee hunters or even just some of the distance hunters who are still really good up close are sort of getting too close to you. If you use your aerial dodge to get into the action, then it means that you kind of don't really have an out. And so I would definitely recommend just kind of saving that aerial dodge ability. And then, yeah, if you see a Reeve or a J3 or someone like that, even a Groz, getting closer and closer to you, then you definitely want to be using that aerial dodge, because up close, I just think she's not really that good. At least that is not her strong suit anyway. Now, as for her other ability, the poisoned spread shot, this thing is insane and you should be making the most of it whenever you can. I've found this to be pretty much the most useful way to use her so far, because this thing can deal a heap of damage, especially if you're hitting multiple of those arrows on the same enemy. It will like compound that damage and it can take out some pretty strong hunters very, very quickly. If you pair this with the regular bow, not only is it dealing that initial damage, it's then dealing tick damage, and then, like I said, your regular bow, if you can hit a max damage shot for about 180 damage, you are going to wipe out hunters very, very quickly. So make the most of that ability. You pretty much want to use it as much as you possibly can. In the same way as that aerial dodge, sometimes, depending on the situation, it is maybe best to keep it as a bit of a backup. But if you're at range, for example, and you're not in any immediate danger, just use the hell out of it, because it is very, very good. Not only when you fully hold it in and it becomes more accurate, but even if there's multiple enemies sort of closing ground on you, you can just do it without making it fully accurate, and it will spread out a little bit and be more likely to hit more enemies, obviously for a bit less damage, but it still does tick damage to all of those enemies, and it might kind of make them think twice about attacking you. Now, also don't forget about the jump boost ability. That is essentially just a double jump. If you just tap jump twice, you will do like a sort of somersault double jump type of thing. And this thing is really useful. It definitely allows you to be a lot more agile and kind of get to those hard to reach places where a lot of hunters may not be able to follow you. Like I said before, maybe J3 or Groz are chasing you down and you're on a map where there's a bit of verticality. Make the most of that, because you can definitely just kind of get to safety where a lot of hunters can't really follow you, and it can completely change the tide of a battle. Now, the last tip I have is to do with her ult, and I would definitely say it's best to try and use her ultimate in situations where enemies are kind of going to be trapped, because that will give you the best bang for your buck. So for those who don't know, enemies who get stuck inside that gas for a certain amount of time, they become paralyzed and they will literally just not be able to move for what feels like maybe 2 to 3 seconds. And so if you can increase the chances of having them trapped in there, because obviously they can very easily get out of that range, but if you increase the chances of trapping them, for example, throwing it at an objective where they might not want to run away, not only does it deal really good damage, but it also kind of paralyzes them, which is then an almost guaranteed kill on essentially anyone, because if you combine the ultimate damage with a guaranteed headshot from your bow while they're standing still, obviously you're surely not going to miss that shot if they're standing still. That will borderline kill any hunter in the game. And even if it's a tank like Groz, for example, it might not fully kill him, but you can still spam him with a few of those rapid fire shots, or you can use that poison spread shot to kind of finish him off. So make the most of that. Obviously her ult is kind of just good in any situation, but if you can try to increase the chances of having those enemies stuck in there, that will make that even better than it originally was. Overall, when it comes to playing as Nox, I think you just want to play a distant yet still aggressive playstyle, if that makes sense. I think you don't want to be sitting at the back of the map like Dialgo players do, but on top of that, you don't want to be running around like a madman and get too close to the action, because that is also not her strong suit. I think always being involved and always being in that sort of mid-range distance where you can still deal a lot of damage, but you're not in immediate danger, that is definitely where she thrives. If you can try to kind of always be involved, but I guess sit on the outskirts of the action, it means that everyone else is, you know, in and amongst each other fighting, and they're all distracted by each other, and you're still close enough to deal damage, yet none of them are really paying any attention to you, and that allows you to kind of go a bit unnoticed through that chaos while still having a big part to play, because you can still deal a hell of a lot of damage from that sort of mid-range distance, and hell, even from long range you can deal a lot of damage too. So don't play too aggressive with Nox, but also don't sit too far back, because she is definitely too good to be just sitting at the back of the map. And if you combine that sort of playstyle with all of those other tips that I mentioned, I am certain you guys are going to have a very fun time when it comes to playing as Nox. But that is it for some basic tips and tricks. I'm keen to hear some extra tips and tricks from you guys, so be sure to leave a comment down below. And like I said, I will be getting into full-on in-depth hunter guides for every single hunter during this season. It might be a little bit later in the season, or at least towards the middle, just because we've got that PC playtest coming up, so that will take a lot of the content over the next week or two. But like I said, keep your eyes peeled, because there is going to be a lot of guide content starting in this season. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and may the force be with you always.